This is Donna with More Than a Review, and I'm excited to be here with Liz today, and we are going to talk about her most recent book, Heaven Has No Rage. And she has already told me a little bit about the book, and it sounds very good. But let's start, Liz. Tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself, and then kind of what led you to write even.
Okay, sure. Well, what led me to write, let's start with, I was a reader. I was the kid in the classroom who was always had her nose in a book. I remember my parents coming in, and when I was growing up, yelling at me to turn off the flashlight and put away the book. Books got me through my actually 10th grade history class. I spent the entire year reading books in the back of the classroom. The teacher swore I was going to fail the class, but I didn't. But it was when I read Mary Higgins Clark's Still Watch, that I went, wow, that would be really, really cool. So I thought, I'll write a book. And then I even went to college. I was an English major. Of course, English majors write books. But then I got married, and then I had kids, and then the book kind of, fell by the wayside. But when I got the time to pick that up again, I actually found myself out of a day job. And my husband said, why don't you write that book, finish that book? And the first thing I thought of was, I'm going to write a mystery. I knew I wanted to write a mystery because that's what I read. That's what I loved to read. So I wrote a mystery, and it was really horrible, and I put it away. Fortunately, I met some people who helped me write another one who was a little bit better. But yeah, so, I kind of found myself in writing then. Now I still work a day job. I still work 9 to 5, the day job, as we call it. I raised my 2 kids. My daughter is a sophomore in college now. My son is he's a senior in high school. We're slowly pushing him. You need to go to college. You need to get out. So now I have, it's just me and my husband and my greyhound and my writing. And now I have the time to do what really I think I always wanted to do. Now that I think back on it, I'm like, this is what I really wanted to do. I didn't want to write the software manual, so I wanted to write mysteries. So yeah, it's kind of liberating to hit that empty nest. And now my dog is just curled up in the corner. He's so much less demanding than my children.
And that depends, because some dogs are not as less demanding.
No, he's not demanding. He's a retired racer. He's a low-key guy. Feed him in the morning, feed him in the afternoon, let him out a couple times a day. Make sure to give him a couple of ear scratches. He's cool. He'll just lay on that bed and adore me from afar.
We talked that he is definitely the highlight of her social media.
He is the highlight of my social media.
I've seen pictures of him. He is adorable.
Oh, thank you.
He's adorable.
Yeah, he's a rock star.
So I was going to ask, what is there anything about writing? Because you had wanted to do it for so long. Is there any anticipations or expectations you had about being a writer that you're like, oh, those are not true?
Oh yeah. Well, I thought it would be easy.
Oh yeah.
When I sat down to write the first book, because I'd read so many mysteries, I'm like, I know what a mystery is supposed to be. How hard can this be? Well, it turns out it's really hard. Oh. And you have to write the characters, and you have to have the plot, and it has to be, you have to have the twists and the turns, and it's really hard to write the book. And then it doesn't stop there. You grow up thinking, and maybe this was like this in the 80s, but you write the book and you turn in the book, and then someone else markets the book. Yeah. I only have to write the book. That is so not true in 2019. The author has to get in the trenches and market the book. And that's where I was like, oh wow, this is really, really hard, because like most writers, I'm an introvert. I like being by myself. To actually the thought of walking up and doing an interview, or walking up and saying, hey, I've written a book and here it is, was terrifying. But I've had to learn how to do it, and I won't claim that I'm doing it particularly well yet, but I'm trying. But that was probably between this is, how hard is it? It's really hard. And, oh, what do you mean I have to, I can't just write the book and put it out there and legions of adoring fans pick it up. No, that doesn't work. You've got to market it.
I hear that from a lot of authors, and it's a totally different skill set to market and to write.
It is. You have to come at it. I mean, when I sit down and I write the book, that's my baby. And I can be artistic, and I can be a little bit whatever and weird and you know, emotionally attached to it. But you have to be a businesswoman when you market the book. And it's totally different mindset than writing. And some authors really struggle with it. I know I did at first. I hope I'm getting better. I've worked with Dana Kay, who's a publicist. She's given me lots of awesome tips. But yeah, it's really, it's not my thing, but it has to be my thing. I'm making it.
That's one question I always like to ask is like, what advice would you give for like aspiring writers out there?
First, read a lot in your genre.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the first thing is don't try to write the book that you think everybody else wants to read. Write the book that you would want to read, which means you have to read in your genre, but you also have to read outside your genre. I mean, I read histories, I read a lot of mysteries, a lot of crime fiction, but I also read romance, I read nonfiction, I read fantasy, you know, so be a reader. When people walk up to me and say, I want to write a book, but I don't have time to read, I'm like, you're really going to have a hard time. Second, just write. You know, sit down and write the book. Write the book. Don't tell yourself you're going to write it someday, or you know, whatever. But you've got to learn the craft. There is more to it than pushing a noun against a verb. You've got to take classes, or hopefully, and hook yourself up with an organization in your genre. You know, if you write mystery, get involved with Sisters in Crime.
Yeah.
You know, take their classes. You know, if you write children's books, I always mess up the Society of Children Writers and Illustrators or something. I can't. It's a really long acronym. Fantasy authors have, you know, their group. Get involved with the group, and then find yourself some supportive friends. I would never be able to do this without my critique group. You know, the group that reads what I wrote and tells me this really is working. This isn't not so much, but we can fix it. And that's a lot of advice.
Yeah.
But
no,
but you can't do this alone. I mean, it's a solitary endeavor, but you can't really do it alone. You can't market it. You can't write it. You can't. You need to get out there.
Well, it sounds like you've done very well, so
thank you.
definitely take her advice there. But tell us a little bit about this book.
This is Heaven Has No Rage is the second book in my Laurel Highlands mystery series, and it starts with the protagonist, Jim Duncan, who is a state trooper with the Pennsylvania State Police. He shows up at a fire at a ski resort. The ski resort is fictional. I don't have bad things happen at real places. And there's a dead body, of course. But he finds out, he makes the assumption that the dead body is the guy who rented the property. And he finds out that's not the case. So the question becomes, who is this guy? Why was he there? And why did someone want to kill him? And at the same time, the second protagonist, Sally Castle, who's an assistant public defender with Fayette County, has encountered a slightly unwanted secret admirer who is sending her notes that are just a little bit creepy. And as the time goes on, they get a little creepier. So they follow the parallel tracks, and they eventually, you come together. Heaven Has No Rage is actually from a line from William Congreve, which is, heaven has no rage like love to hatred turned. And we all know the second half, actually, which is, and hell no fury like a woman scorned. But there's one of the authors I had who blurbed it said, it's greed, obsession, and betrayal. And those are the themes that are running through this particular book. What happens when the thing you really want is denied to you and you think someone else is?
So when you write the book, do you already know like how it's going to end? Do you plot it?
I am not a plotter. I do not write a detailed outline. I have tried to do a detailed outline. It never really works for me. I start with believing I know who did it and why. Inevitably, that changes at least once, sometimes twice.
That's amazing.
I think in this book, I managed to keep it to 2 changes. The one I'm working on now, it's changed 4 times. But I do start at least with an idea of, who's the bad guy, why has he done what he's done. I always know the victim, but it's getting, I think I know. And if my critique partner was here, she would say, she lies. She has no idea. And I do have an idea. I'm just open to the process of finding a better idea.
That's awesome. Oh my goodness. So what would the character in your book say about you?
Chill out. Just relax. Have a drink, have a glass of wine, and chill out. It's all going to come out okay in the end.
Oh,
I just,
great.
you get deep. With my son going to college, it's like I told him, I said, before I leave for BadgerCon, you need to have your college applications done. I'm sick of dealing with this. And my daughter is all, worrying. When you worry about kids, you get all high strung. And I think both Jim and Sally would tell me, just relax. It'll work out. You don't need to worry so much.
That's good. That's good. So for readers new to your writing, where would they start? Because you've written several books.
I've written, there's a couple. This is the second. There's a collection called Murder Most Scenic, which is a connected series of short stories that have the same characters. And that's kind of prequel-y to Root of All Evil, which is the first book in the series. You can certainly start with Root of All Evil and figure it out. But if you want to know who these people are and why they exist and why they talk to each other and why they like each other, the connection of short stories would be where you start. But I think you could, I always try to get the mystery encapsulated, so the mysteries stand by themselves. You could pick up this book and be able, you would fall in pretty quickly to what's going on and where the mystery is. But if you are the type of reader who says, absolutely not, I need to start at the very beginning.
You OCD readers
there
out
are people like that. I know people like that. I'm not one of those people, but I know a lot of people like that. You would probably start with Murder Most Scenic, which is just a short story collection.
Okay, very good.
I did actually have a reviewer who had just read this book and really liked the book, but then was like, well, I wanted to know why Jim and Sally's relationship was so strained. And I'm like, read the first book. That's what you miss by not reading in order, is kind of the character arc and development that way. So if you want to know why Jim and Sally are a little bit hesitant to speak around each other, you read Root of All Evil.
Very good. So I always like to end with a fun question. So what would readers be surprised to know about you?
What would readers be surprised to know about me? Well, I've already mentioned I'm a mother with 2 teenage children. I am a former military spouse. My husband spent 20-some years in the Army. So I did the whole raise the kids while he was deployed, thing. And they were young. They were 5 and 3. So it was a lot of running around. So I am a former military spouse. I do still work during the day. I hold a 9-to-5 job. So the writing has to take its place in between the demands of the corporate world.
That's amazing that you can still be that creative at the end of the day.
I do it in the middle of the day. You've got to find a writing instructor of mine once said, find your creative time. Write during your most creative time. And my most creative time is right about a lunch hour, like between 11 and 1. Yeah. So I usually set aside my lunch hour and say that's when I am doing, the blinkers go on, don't talk to me, I'm busy. And I've gotten really into the retired racer greyhound community. They're wonderful dogs. I will not, any opinions on greyhound racing. But like I mentioned, my dog is my rock star, my social media rock star. And I've really, fallen in on Instagram with people who, there's a lot of passion in that community. So I love my dog. My dog is mine. And he is definitely my dog. He will kind of sort of listen to everybody else in the family, but when I say no, stop, stand, whatever, yes, Mom. He listens better than my children. Yes.
That is so true sometimes. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.
I enjoyable.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.